Take numero 7. That's a 7. I have tried numerous ways to do this that I thought would be creative and fun, but due to lighting and the room being not designed as a studio of any sort, I'm kind of stuck doing it this way, and I didn't want to. I wanted to have some fun with it, but at this point I'm tired. I've spent about an hour trying to get this started, and every time I get it started, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So here we go. Number 31. Down 4 spots from last week. New Jersey. So New Jersey had a rough week, and some of the teams behind them had better weeks than they did. So that's why we end up with New Jersey in this position, where they are now the lowest team on the charts. I apologize to New Jersey fans. It's nothing personal. But, again, the team that wasn't 31st at one point this week is number 30. They're down 1 spot from where they were the week before, of course. Last week's countdown, they were number 29. This week, they're number 30, and that's St. Louis, who beat Calgary in Calgary, kind of a big game, and yet their overall results have been lackluster. And I don't think St. Louis fans are surprised to hear anybody saying that. Number 29, moving up 1 spot from last week, LA. LA, of course, had a win today as well. So for me, with St. Louis winning, I would have bumped them up further, but when all the teams ahead of them win, it's hard to do that. And LA comes into Vegas tomorrow with this win in their tucked into their belt, and we'll see whether or not they can get one from Vegas as well before the break. If they can, Vegas fans might say, you know what, Shannon, just stay away from our games. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Number 28, moving down 4 spots from last week, Arizona. And yes, they won tonight. They beat the Colorado Avalanche, and that's impressive. And yet, Colorado's been on the downswing. You'll see that in tonight's countdown. But Arizona, the offense, for me, doesn't show that they're necessarily better, just that they had one good night, and I would need to see something more consistently out of them before I'm going to move them back up. Number 27, down 1 spot from last week, Ottawa. The Senators are in the bottom row because they meander. They're unable to get any kind of sustained success going on, and it is costing them a lot. We'll see at the end of the year what it costs them at the draft table, because, of course, they don't own their own draft pick. But for right now, it's definitely costing them a chance at the playoffs. Number 26, moving up 5 spots from last week, Chicago. Yep. Hawks move up 5 spots. A 3-game winning streak will do that. A 3-game winning streak makes a big, big difference. And for Chicago, it's a winning streak that has been impressive. It's a winning streak over some pretty darn good teams, division rivals. This is the kind of thing that you want to see if you're a Hawks fan, and this week you've seen it. First siren since I started the video. Number 25, dropping. Let's go ahead and get that there. There we go. Dropping 6 spots from last week, Detroit. So the Red Wings, the bottom is definitely fallen out of it now. They were competitive. I had them in the top 10 a few weeks ago. Now they're back down to where I think everybody else probably has them. And it's been a pretty precipitous fall for them, with other teams just passing them. And it's one of those years again for Detroit. And you wonder, how many more years do they have before they're a playoff team again? It doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. Number 24, moving up 4 spots from last week. Well, Florida's got that going for them. They moved up 4 spots in the power rankings this week. Not a fantastic team by any stretch, and they had that rough 6-1 loss against Toronto. Absolutely a rough loss. But there's still hope, I guess. There's still hope. And we'll see where Florida ends up next week. Because, again, we've got the break. So there's only going to be a limited amount of games next week to grade for any power rankings. And we'll see if they continue trending up. If they stay the same, they trend down. But for right now, Florida, they've been lingering in the mid to late 20s, basically. Number 23, down 2 spots from last week, Carolina. Yep, they have trouble scoring. Some games they shoot a lot, don't score. Tonight they did that against Pittsburgh, and it has just been a rough year for Carolina. Really, honestly, it's been a rough year for them. And they're another one, and there are numerous teams in this list who really need some playoff success sometime soon, and it looks like a lot of them are going to be struggling to get that. Number 22, up 3 spots from last week, Philadelphia Flyers. The Philadelphia Flyers, who, let me go ahead and make that a little bigger. As I go up, I'll try to make it a little bigger. There we go. All right. Number 22, the Philadelphia Flyers. So they move up a little bit this week. It is a smaller jump than it would have been if not for the loss today. The loss they had today hurt their chances of moving up. But overall, decent week for Philly. It doesn't get them back in the running necessarily, but Carter Hart gives them hope for the future, which they had anyways. But seeing some of that future right now makes things feel a little better right now. Number 21, down 1 spot from last week, the New York Rangers. And for New York, much the same as a lot of these teams in here. You're looking at teams that likely don't make the playoffs. The separation between haves and have-nots seems to be happening a lot sooner this year than in normal seasons. And I'm going to have to take a look at the standings now and the standings at last Christmas and see, is that true? Or, is this just every year we do this, and maybe this year, now that I'm putting 100% of my attention to National Hockey League games and how all this works, maybe now I'm seeing a pattern that I didn't notice before. That, if your team's out at Christmas, they're probably out for the season. No playoffs for them. Number 20, moving up 2 spots from last week, Vancouver. Half decent week for Vancouver. I'm thinking that from that 1-0 loss against Winnipeg tonight, 20 might be the highest they get. I want to be optimistic about things for Vancouver, but I'm not optimistic about this season. I don't see them in the playoffs this year. I think they're playing some solid hockey. I think, they gave Tampa a bit of a run for their money, and they did well enough against Winnipeg, except where they needed to, which was scoring the goals. So that was their problem tonight, as has been the problem for them regularly. Number 19, dropping 1 spot from last week, Minnesota. So the Wild, who lost in overtime tonight against Dallas, that's why they dropped a spot. Otherwise, they would have stayed in the exact same spot. Wouldn't have been a change. Because number 18, moving up 5 spots from last week, is Dallas. 5-spot jump for Dallas. They had a good week. They're not in the playoffs, but they're not as far out as they could have been. And I'm hopeful for them. The loss against Chicago hurts, but the win in Minnesota takes some of the edge off of that, and they finally win one on the road. So for that, Dallas moves up. Number 17, dropping 2 spots from last week, the New York Islanders, who've had again, they're good in some games, but the overall picture with the Islanders, and I know Islander fans don't like hearing me say it, the overall picture with the Islanders to me is kind of bleak. Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Washington look like the best 3 teams in the Metro, and I don't see Boston and Montreal falling off. Buffalo has started picking themselves up potentially again. That result tonight over Anaheim. Toronto and Tampa are not falling out of the playoffs. So for me, with the Islanders, I look at their stats, I look at their overall numbers, and I say, you know what, I don't know that this team can get it done. And the loss against Vegas is one of those ones that hurts. They need to stay hot, and I know it may seem unfair, but that's where I have them right now. Number 16, also dropping 2 spots from last week, Anaheim. So for the Ducks, the loss against Buffalo definitely hurt them. So, for me, the Ducks are They're still top three, and I don't know that they get threatened too much for a drop out of that top three by the end of the season. I think that San Jose and Anaheim in the first round would be a lot of fun. That's dependent on Calgary staying number one. That's dependent on Vegas not ending up in that top three spot. There's a lot that can still change for a division that was supposed to be not very good. But for me right now, Anaheim at 16th, I'm fine with. Again, while it's Christmas time, I don't expect any charity with these videos or any kind of Christmas cheer. I expect a lot of, you hate my team. That's kind of what happens, right? Number 15, dropping 6 spots from last week. Edmonton. The Oilers. The odds of them making the playoffs, I still think, are relatively good. But I've started seeing some of the similar cracks with Edmonton right now that we had before they brought in Ken Hitchcock. And I do wonder if maybe this defensive juggernaut he was putting together, maybe it wasn't sustainable. Maybe there was a fool's gold aspect to that. And maybe we're starting to see that. Maybe the Oilers are starting to fall back to reality, which would be bad news for Oiler fans. They wouldn't necessarily be happy about that. Well, I wouldn't expect that they would be. But yeah, so the Oilers with kind of a precipitous drop this week. Number 14, also with a precipitous drop, down 6 spots from last week. Colorado. Some unnerving results, and the loss against Arizona it definitely fits in that category as well. Colorado below 500 over their last, I want to say, 11 or 12 games. These are not great trends, and we'll see if they continue. So for the Oilers and for Colorado, it was a rough week, which meant that a couple of teams that were lower down got pushed up in the standings overall on the power rankings. Now, this one legitimately got there at number 13. Not that any of them illegitimately got there. Number 13, up 4 spots from last week, is Boston. I had concerns they might fall out of the playoffs. Bergeron's back now. Wow. You know, when I say, well, one guy's not going to make a huge difference, then Bergeron comes back, and in that first game, he really does. We'll see if it makes that sort of difference over a long period. But, yeah, for tonight, it absolutely did. This afternoon, I guess. Although Nashville fans would say, well, it was a matinee game, so it doesn't count. I've seen that. I've seen where fans go, it's a matinee game. Doesn't matter. But, yeah, for Boston, 13th this week, I think they've made some good moves. So for people tracking my favorite teams, 13, 18, and 20 is where my 3 favorite teams are at this week. So still doesn't look like that a team I cheer for is going to win a Stanley Cup this year, but the year is still middle-aged. It's not really young anymore, is it? Number 12, same spot as last week. Montreal. Congratulations to Montreal on being able to stay in the same spot as last week. I think Montreal's a serviceable team. I think they are on the right track. I think there's some improvements to be made for Montreal in the blue line. But what I saw today of them against Vegas, good team. Fast team. I saw that swarming firsthand. Their cycle game offensively is impressive. And just the way that the work ethic is very impressive. Kotkaniemi impressed me as well. Didn't get on the board, but I thought he played really well. I could totally see why that kid was kept on the team and is still playing for them. And I expect him to play the full season. Sitting this week in the number 11 spot, up 2 spots from last week, Pittsburgh. It is a slow but steady climb for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have now won 8 of their last 11. And they continue to climb their way back up. And at this rate, yes, they'll be top 10 next week. Pittsburgh's playing well. And now their goaltenders, both of them, playing pretty darn well as well. Murray's played very well since coming back from injury, and DeSmith has been pretty solid the whole year long. So we'll see where that ends up. But for right now, Pittsburgh looks like Pittsburgh, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's been, for people who don't like Pittsburgh, it's been tough. I say that, and I know people are like, you just don't like my Penguins. Whatever. It's easy. Number 10, up 6 spots from last week, Columbus. Columbus is one of those ones that had a decent week. These guys drop. this team drops, brings this team up, and I thought Columbus ends up a little bit ahead of the Montreal Canadiens, and jump past Pittsburgh as well. So Columbus ends up at 10. I like a lot of what's going on with Columbus right now. And it was a bounce back after last week saw them drop a lot. So I felt like, I'll push them back up. They had a decent week. Bobrovsky's starting to put up some really good numbers. Panarin's putting up scary numbers. Atkinson looks like he could score 45-50 this year. Decent run for them after kind of a shaky period there. Number 10 or 9. Sorry, number 9. Buffalo moving up 2 spots. So the Buffalo Sabres move up 2 spots. They're number 9 this week. And, and I've been saying Buffalo has to be careful. But while saying Buffalo has to be careful of teams behind them, the fact is they're still playing pretty solid hockey. The thing is, the Atlantic has a lot of teams playing pretty solid hockey. You have Florida and the Red Wings down here. And then it just starts to change once you get to this point in the countdown. And things change pretty darn quick. And of course, Ottawa down in the bottom row. Because you've got so many teams that are playing well in that division. You've got the 3 that are poor and the 5 that are pretty fantastic. Which makes it tougher for the 3 teams that are poor in that division, right? So for me, Buffalo moves up 2 spots this week. Number 8, dropping 3 spots from last week. Predators. I debated about dropping them further, but here was the thing. I couldn't argue them below any of these teams down here. Maybe Pittsburgh, but then I'd be pushing Pittsburgh from 13th all the way to 8th, and I didn't think that Pittsburgh had a week that justified that huge of a jump. So I went with this as it is, and Nashville being 8th. They're still technically in a top row. I only have 2 teams in the top row on this mini board, but they're in a top row, just not the top row. And for fans of Nashville, there's nothing to worry about yet. They've got a lot of distance to be made up by other teams before they have to start really worrying. But Winnipeg is starting to make up a lot of, starting to pull ahead. Not just be ahead a little bit, but maybe start pulling out like Washington has. We'll see if Winnipeg does that or not. Number 7, moving up 3 spots from last week. Vegas is having a solid run. Yes, they lost today in overtime. If they lose tomorrow night against the Kings, they won't be 7th tomorrow night. They could drop as far as 10th if it's a really ugly result, and LA could find themselves up as high as 27th, I would say, because I don't see myself putting them ahead of Chicago right now. But Vegas has a good team, pretty solid work ethic, and Marc-Andre Fleury is playing some really great hockey right now. It'll be interesting to see if they go with Subban tomorrow, because his numbers were decent his last game out, and I think Gerard Gallant's going to want to get him that first win. Maybe the idea is that once he gets that first win, gets that confidence, and the team's playing well in front of him, then he can start playing Subban more regularly. But for this week, I have Vegas at number 7. Number 6, Sharks are in the same spot as last week. The Sharks gained a point today on the Anaheim Ducks and are playing pretty solid hockey. And what's scary with them is that Carlson's starting to play really well. If San Jose's goaltending numbers were better, I could almost guarantee you San Jose would be first in that division. And we'd be talking about them being one of the best teams in the West. But for right now, they're where they're at, and it's the same spot as last week. Number 5, down 1 spot from last week. I told you guys there wasn't a lot of change at the top. The Flames drop 1 spot. I wonder with Calgary if we're going to see... To me, they feel like a team that has overachieved to this point in the season. So to me, I feel like there should be some sort of a clawback. And I don't know if we're starting to see that or not, but I feel like it's coming. We'll see. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, right? Number 4, moving up 3 spots from last week. Toronto. So for Maple Leaf fans, you move up 3 spots this week. Good on you. Springboard past Nashville, San Jose, and Calgary. So for the Toronto Maple Leafs, good week. Matthews is starting to look like Matthews again. Marner looks like he wants to start scoring goals. Anderson's been fantastic. There's not really a whole lot not to like right now with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the record. They've been pretty awesome. Number 3, same spot as last week. Capitals. Yep. They don't move. Same spot. I like them in 3. At one point this week, I had them down in 4. They went right back up to 3. So I have no argument with where they're at on the board, which is good because if I had an argument with my own power rankings, we'd be in trouble. Number 2, same spot as last week for Winnipeg. Number 1, same spot as last week for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Nothing in Tampa Bay's game right now that tells me they're not still number 1. Nothing with Winnipeg that tells me that I should start dropping them down because they've been winning big games, including a victory over the Tampa Bay Lightning in what was, I think, the game of the week. Let's go ahead and do this. This. There. Put them there. And, yeah, that's fine. Put them down. I'll put them down. And, oh yeah. Yeah, we'll put them there and there. Yeah, that's nice. All right, so for my Vegas hotel room, after consuming, got to be 13 tequila, 14. Not sure. They should have stopped serving me. I realized that I hate myself. So number 1's Pittsburgh. Number 2's Montreal. Number 3's LA. Number 4's Chicago. And thus ends the last power rankings I'll ever do. At the bottom, Boston and Vancouver, those are in the wrong spot. Vancouver needs to be 31st. Who respects a whale? Number 30, Boston, because who respects a B? 29's Dallas Stars, which looks like a stupid sheriff's badge. And I hate myself. So Pittsburgh's number 1. So there you go, power rankings from Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. Go ahead and take a look out the door so you can't see me crying because I'm a horrible person who just has a set of teams that just aren't any good. And that's the end of the line. So thanks for all your support over the last couple years, but I think my spirit's been broken on this one. So hit like and subscribe if you want to see when this channel comes back to life. I'll talk to you again soon.